The Glyca were a species defined by their deep empathy and scholarly pursuits. Their bodies were slender, almost willowy, with large, dark eyes that seemed to absorb the universe's sorrows and wonders with equal intensity. They communicated through soft, melodic chimes and subtle shifts in the bioluminescent patterns that danced across their skin. Harmony, understanding, and the gentle accumulation of knowledge were the pillars of their ancient civilization. They had observed humanity with a gentle, if somewhat perplexed, curiosity. Humans were so full of contradictions, capable of profound artistic expression and brutal warfare, driven by intense emotions the Glyca often found overwhelming. One particular human custom that fascinated and mildly troubled the Glyca was their relationship with pets. The concept of keeping a lesser creature, an animal, for companionship and emotional satisfaction was something the Glyca struggled to categorize within their empathic framework. They saw it as a form of benign, perhaps even affectionate, dominance. A primitive holdover, where humans, not yet fully evolved in their empathic range, projected their need for connection onto beings they could easily control, deriving comfort from an unequal power dynamic. It wasn't malicious, the Glyca scholars concluded in their meticulously compiled xenological studies, but it was indicative of a certain developmental stage. The Human Affection Dominance Paradigm in Interspecies Cohabitation, read the title of one widely respected Glyca treatise. Researcher Lyra, a Glyca specializing in emergent species ethics, was part of a joint expedition with humans to the newly discovered world of Xylos 7, a planet teeming with unique and complex ecosystems. Lyra, like her kin, possessed an innate gentleness and a keen observational capacity. She found the human members of the team to be boisterous and often unpredictable, but also resourceful and surprisingly warm. Among them was Dr. Aris Thorne, a xenobotanist with a quiet demeanor, a kind smile, and an almost constant companion. A scruffy, medium-sized canine of mixed earth breed named Buster. Buster, with his wagging tail, enthusiastic barks, and unwavering devotion to Thorne, was a source of particular study for Lyra. She observed Thorne sharing his rations with the animal, speaking to it in soft tones, engaging in play, rituals that involved throwing a chewed synthetic ball. Lyra noted it all, her internal chimes resonating with a mixture of analytical curiosity and a faint, unidentifiable emotional echo she couldn't quite place. Subject Thorne exhibits strong attachment to the Canis familiaris designated Buster, Lyra recorded in her personal log. The animal reciprocates with clear signals of social bonding. Power dynamic remains asymmetrical, yet appears mutually beneficial within limited parameters. The expedition on Xylos 7 was proceeding smoothly for several weeks. The planet was a treasure trove of biological wonders. Thorne, with Buster often trotting faithfully at his heels, equipped with a miniature environmental suit for safety, collected samples of bioluminescent fungi and gravity-defying flora. Lyra and her Glyca colleagues meticulously catalogued energy signatures and atmospheric anomalies. The catastrophe struck without warning. Xylos 7 was geologically unstable, a fact the initial long-range surveys had underestimated. A deep-seated tectonic shift triggered a chain reaction. Massive earthquakes ripped across the continent where their main base camp was established, followed by a series of volcanic eruptions that spewed ash and superheated gas into the atmosphere. Chaos erupted, alarms blared. The joint teams scrambled for the emergency evacuation shuttles. Lyra found herself near Thorne as a particularly violent tremor threw them both off their feet. Debris rained down from the crumbling ceiling of the temporary habitat module. Buster, yelping in fear, pressed himself against Thorne. "To the shuttles!" shouted Commander Eva Rostova, the human expedition leader, her voice cutting through the din. "Everyone now!" Lyra, regaining her balance, saw Thorne trying to calm Buster while simultaneously attempting to secure a case of vital botanical samples. Another tremor, stronger this time, split the ground nearby. A chasm opened, cutting off their direct path to the main shuttle bay. A smaller, short-range scout shuttle was docked on a landing pad further afield, a more perilous route across unstable terrain. "Thorn, Lyra, this way," Rostova yelled, pointing towards an auxiliary exit that led towards the scout shuttle's direction. "We'll meet you there if we can. Main group is heading for Shuttle Alpha." Thorn, Lyra, and a handful of other humans and Glyca scrambled towards the auxiliary exit. The journey to the scout shuttle pad was a nightmare. Ash choked the air, visibility was near zero, and the ground bucked and roared beneath them. During one particularly violent lurch, a section of the pathway collapsed. Thorn, Buster, and Lyra found themselves on one side of a newly formed, rapidly widening crevasse, while the others were on the relatively safer side, closer to the scout shuttle. "The gap's too wide," one of the humans shouted across. "We have to go. We'll try to circle back for you if the pad holds." They disappeared into the swirling ash, their forms quickly swallowed. Lyra felt a wave of cold despair, a sensation her species rarely encountered with such intensity. They were cut off, the environment degrading rapidly. She looked at Thorn. The human's face was grim, smudged with ash, but his arm was firmly around Buster, who was whimpering, his small body trembling. "We need to find shelter, Lyra," Thorn said, his voice strained but calm. "Then we figure out how to call for help or make our way to higher ground." Lyra, through her comm unit, still linked to the expedition's monitoring network, though direct communication was now impossible due to atmospheric interference, knew the other Glyca aboard the main orbital station would be tracking their biosignals. They would be observing. The Glyca ethics protocols for such situations were clear. In dire circumstances, prioritize the survival of the individual with the highest probability of contributing to the species' collective knowledge and advancement. In this scenario, between a Glyca researcher and a human botanist, the calculation would be complex. Between a sentient being and a non-sentient pet, the choice was obvious by Glyca standards. The next few days were a brutal struggle for survival. Thorn, using his knowledge of xenobotany, managed to identify a few hardy local plants that were non-toxic and offered minimal sustenance. He always gave the first portion to Buster, mashing it up to make it easier for the dog to eat, even when his own stomach growled in protest. Buster's small environmental suit had been damaged, a tear along one leg. Thorn meticulously repaired it, using sealant from his own suit's emergency kit, leaving a minor vulnerability in his own thermal regulation. Lyra observed this, her internal chimes resonating with a perplexed series of notes. Subject: Thorn prioritizes resource allocation to the Canis familiaris, despite clear personal detriment. This contradicts standard self-preservation models. They found temporary shelter in a shallow cave. The air outside was thick with volcanic gas. Buster developed a cough. Thorn held the dog close, murmuring words of comfort, his own breathing becoming more labored. He fashioned a crude extra filter for Buster's mask from a piece of his own undersuit, further compromising his own protection. "Aris," Lyra chimed softly, her own voice raspy from the ash. "Your energy levels are depleting. You must conserve your resources." The animal. Thorn looked at her, his eyes reflecting a fierce, unwavering resolve that startled her. "Buster is not the animal, Lyra. He's my friend. He's family." Family. Lyra processed the word. Glyca had strong communal bonds, but the human concept of family, with its intense, sometimes illogical loyalties, was still something she was trying to fully comprehend. To extend it with such ferocity to a non-sentient creature. The Glyca on the orbital station watched Thorn's biosignals with growing alarm and a profound, species-wide confusion. Senior researcher Thuron, Lyra's mentor, monitored the data streams, his usually serene bioluminescent patterns flickering with agitation. "His oxygen saturation is dropping," Thuron chimed to his colleagues. "He is consistently diverting life support resources to the canine. His actions are irrational. He is decreasing his own probability of survival significantly." A rescue attempt was being coordinated, but the extreme weather conditions made it incredibly risky. They could only make one pass with a small, specialized retrieval drone capable of carrying one, perhaps two at extreme push, life forms of human size. The ethical dilemma weighed heavily on the Glyca. Lyra was their priority as a Glyca, but Thorn was also a sentient being, a scientist. The dog, Buster, was, by all logical metrics, expendable. On Xylos 7, the situation grew dire. Thorn was weakening. Buster, sensing his human's distress, licked his face, whining softly, trying to nudge him awake when he slumped into unconsciousness for brief periods. Thorn would always rouse himself, force a smile for the dog, and share whatever meager water he'd managed to collect from condensation. Then came the faint whine of the rescue drone. It appeared through the ash-filled sky, a small beacon of hope. It landed precariously near their cave entrance. A robotic arm extended, a single rescue sling unfurling. "One," Thorn croaked, his voice barely a whisper. He looked at Lyra, then at Buster, who was now pressed against him, shivering. Thorn's decision, by Glyca logic, should have been clear. Lyra, as another sentient and a member of an allied species, or himself. What he did next shattered every Glyca preconceived notion about human emotional capacity and the affection dominance paradigm. With painstaking effort, Thorn gently lifted Buster. He secured the whimpering dog into the rescue sling. He patted Buster's head, his voice thick with emotion. "Good boy, Buster. You go get help. Be a good boy." He then looked at Lyra. "Take him, Lyra. Make sure he's okay, please." Lyra was stunned into momentary inaction, her chimes a discordant flurry. "Aris, no, this is not logical. The drone can take a sentient." Thorn gave a weak, tired smile. "He is my sentient, Lyra, in all the ways that matter. Go, get him safe." He then activated the drone's ascent beacon. The drone, programmed to retrieve the being secured in its sling, began to lift off, carrying Buster. Lyra could only watch, her large eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief, horror, and a sudden, overwhelming wave of an emotion she could only identify as profound, aching respect. Thorn, having ensured Buster's departure, slumped against the cave wall, his breathing shallow, a faint smile on his lips as he watched the drone disappear into the ash. On the Glyca orbital station, a collective gasp, a silent chime of utter shock, rippled through the assembled researchers. Thuron stared at the telemetry. Thorn's biosignals were fading rapidly, but his last conscious act was not for himself, not even for the fellow sentient Glyca beside him, but for his pet. He chose the canine, one junior researcher chimed, his patterns dimming in disbelief. Thuron's own patterns pulsed with a complex, unprecedented intensity. The affection dominance paradigm. Our understanding is catastrophically incomplete. This is not dominance. This is sacrifice, a depth of selfless loyalty that we have not accounted for. The drone with Buster arrived at the station. The small dog was terrified, but unharmed. Immediately, another, far riskier rescue mission was authorized for Thorn and Lyra, spurred by a new, desperate urgency born from witnessing Thorn's act. The Glyca pilots pushed their craft to the absolute limits, navigating the treacherous conditions with a fervor previously unseen. They found Lyra keeping vigil over Thorn's unconscious form, shielding his face from the falling ash with her own body. They retrieved them both. Thorn was alive, barely. The aftermath of the Xylos 7 incident sent ripples throughout the Glyca civilization, and eventually beyond. Lyra's detailed report, coupled with the irrefutable biometric data of Thorn's actions, forced a complete reevaluation of human nature. "We perceived their bond with pets as a primitive trait," Thuron addressed the Glyca Grand Conclave, his voice carrying a new weight of humility. "We saw it as a need for control, for simple affection from a lesser being. We were profoundly mistaken. What we witnessed in Dr. Aris Thorn was an expression of empathy so profound, so fiercely loyal, that it transcended species, transcended even the fundamental instinct for self-preservation. He was willing to sacrifice his life, not for abstract principle, not for species propagation, but for a singular, beloved companion he considered family." The Glyca began to study human relationships with their animals not with condescension, but with awe. They saw the fierce protectiveness, the unconditional love, the deep grief when a pet was lost, and they began to extrapolate. If humans could form such powerful, selfless bonds with creatures they considered lesser, what terrifying, magnificent depths of loyalty and ferocity would they exhibit for their own kind, for their allies, for those they deemed pack or family on a larger scale? The human concept of pets was no longer seen as a quaint peculiarity. It became, in the eyes of the Glyca, a window into the soul of humanity, revealing a capacity for love and sacrifice that was both inspiring and, frankly, a little terrifying. If a human would die for their dog, what wouldn't they do for their children, for their partners, for their species? The story of Thorn and Buster of Xylo 7 became a legend, not of simple animal rescue, but of the Alpha Protector Protocol, an unwritten, deeply ingrained human imperative to protect the vulnerable members of their perceived pack, regardless of species, often at great personal cost. Galactic policy towards humanity subtly shifted. Species that had once dismissed humans as emotionally volatile and perhaps a bit primitive now looked at them with a new measure of respect and a healthy dose of caution. They were a species capable of forming bonds that defied logic and probability, bonds that could inspire acts of almost insane courage and selflessness. Dr. Aris Thorne recovered, though it took many weeks. The first conscious question he asked was, "Is Buster okay?" When the scruffy terrier, cleared by quarantine, was brought to his recovery room, the reunion was something the observing Glyca medical staff would record as one of the most potent displays of interspecies affection they had ever witnessed. Lyra often visited Thorne during his recovery. She no longer saw him as just a human subject. She saw a being capable of an empathy that, in its own unique way, rivaled even that of the Glyca. "We are re-evaluating our understanding of human companionship, Aris," Lyra chimed softly one day, watching Buster sleep soundly at the foot of Thorne's bed. Thorne smiled, reaching out to gently stroke Buster's head. "He's a good boy, just a member of the family." And the Glyca, and soon the wider galaxy, began to understand that for humanity, family was a bond that could move mountains, defy death, and reshape the understanding of what it meant to love, to protect, and to be truly, fiercely human. The warning became clear. Never threaten what a human loves. The response might be far more than you bargained for.